Miller here with Hug Longer Digital Designs, and today we're going to talk a little bit about underlay. I've had a lot of questions about changing the underlay, adding underlay, taking away underlay, and I think the best place to start is to understand a little bit more about what underlay is and what it does for us. And by understanding this, it'll help you know when you might be able to get rid of some underlay or add some underlay, or if you even want to. Let's start by talking about what underlay does. What underlay will do, for the first thing it'll do is it'll adhere your fabric to your stabilizer. And that's important because you do not want the fabric and stabilizer to move independently. You want them to be one piece. And so by adding underlay, you are making them one piece instead of two pieces. And that's very important to make sure your stitches lay correctly. It also does provide a base layer for your actual stitches, like the skeleton of a body. You can't put the flesh on without the bones in order to make the design not just sink into the fabric, but to be on top of the fabric. It can also do things such as in lettering. When you have, let's visualize a letter S. And if you think about how the needle will go back and forth in a satin letter, it goes from side to side and side to side. And as it does that, it pulls the fabric inward, inward, inward. So in something like lettering, the stabilizer is there, the underlay is there in order to prevent the letter from pulling together the fabric and causing excessive puckering. So let's take a quick look at what we have on the screen here. I just have a very simple heart and the words love one another. The best way I find is I am using Embrilliance, and you can do this in Essentials, I believe. The best way I find to take a look at the underlay close-up is to use your little button right here at the top for your density map. And I'll click on it once and then twice. And then what we're seeing visually here now is the underlay. You can see in the heart that we can go over here and check it out in the properties field. And we have the contour and the perpendicular underlay here on this heart. And that's going to help that lay flat. It's going to help it not pucker. And let's get a close-up look on the letter, shall we? Let me move this over a little bit. Let's take a look at the letter L. And I'm going to make that really big so you can see it well. You can see right here we have a zigzag that goes up and to one side to the other, one side to the other, one side to the other, all throughout the L. And then we also have an edge run. And you see that edge run? It's not at the very, very edge. You wouldn't want that because what would happen is a little bit of it would peek out. So the edge run is put in just a little bit so that what it does is it forms a stop more or less from the pull. So when the stitches go side to side, side to side, side to side, this here helps prevent them from pulling the fabric. And the zigzag helps the entire thing lay flat. We're going to scan over and get a close-up of the heart as well. And I want you to notice once again that the underlay here is not at the edge of our design. I could put it at the edge of the design. I could change this and put it right at the edge there. But what would happen is it would peek out in areas where the stitches were pulling it, and it would give it a kind of a rougher edge, more of a zigzaggy looking edge. And I had this one set in at 7. That seemed to work really well on the test stitch. And speaking of test stitch, just like everything, the most important part of creating a design or changing a design is test stitching it to see how it works. And one of the questions I had was, can I get rid of the underlay? Now, if you're digitizing this yourself, you can get rid of the underlay. And there's certain times that you would want to do so. One of them would be if you're planning on stitching it on perhaps leather. You might want to have a little underlay, but in most cases, leather is not going to need an underlay. Something like a sketchy design, you do not want to underlay on a sketchy design. And let me give you a quick example of that. We're going to bring that heart back in the center here. And let's just make it a little smaller so it fits in the screen. Now, a sketchy design is created by using a higher density. Higher density is less stitches. And then we use the travel edge. Now, here, it's kind of actually pretty, but this is not how it's meant to be. It actually turned out kind of cute. But here, you still have the underlay in it. And so you're not going to get your true sketchy design until you take the underlay out. And there you have more of a sketchy fill. You can give it a little curve and make it like that. Okay. So you would not want to have underlay when you're doing a sketchy design because there's no need for it. Your idea is to just do something super light. It's kind of like a bean stitch. You don't need any underlay under a bean stitch. And in fact, if you had underlay under a bean stitch, you'd be able to see it all. And it wouldn't end up looking very pretty at all. When you're going to perhaps make Christmas cards or holiday cards or birthday cards, you can get rid of the underlay for stitching on paper. You don't really need a super tight stitch on paper. You don't really need to have the base because the paper provides you with a lot of a base already of what the underlay will provide. Toilet paper, digitizing specifically for toilet paper, you'll want to have very minimal of the underlay as well. So I am going to end on the note that there's a lot of different reasons to add more of your underlay or take away some of your underlay. And unless you're digitizing the design, it's probably not a great idea to try to change that design yourself. Might be better to send to the digitizer. But if you need to add additional underlay, if perhaps you are finding that it's not giving you enough stability depending on your fabric, because most digitizers are going to try to digitize for an average piece of fabric, as in something that's maybe a medium weight. In order to digitize for a lightweight and medium weight and a heavyweight, there would be a lot of different files in each sold design. But if you did need to add extra underlay, one thing you would want to consider is something that is available in the Embrilliance Enthusiast, and that would be the knockdown stitching, and that's under the utilities. And if you added a knockdown stitching, it is going to automatically go on the outside of the design a little bit. It's going to automatically go to the first position to be stitched, and you can tell that it's going to add quite a bit of underlay underneath that. And that's going to give you great coverage for something like a velvet or something like a towel with a lot of plush. So that is actually just underlay. That's what the knockdown stitch is. It's underlay that's going to extend beyond the design, and typically that underlay is going to be stitched the same color as the fabric you're stitching on. So that way it's not going to be bold and obvious. It's just going to kind of hold the extra fabric away from the design and provide a way for that design to really pop. I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about what underlay is. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.